going. We'll wait just a couple more minutes because it looks like people are starting to continuing to trickle in, I should say. Bear with us, everybody. We'll just make sure that everybody can get in here that's going to have time today. Make the video available here in a couple of days, and we'll send it out there. Couldn't make it. Alex and I were having that conversation earlier about the last-minute fires that tend to come up in the MSP world. So, you know what the priority is going to be that day. So.
Yeah, Corey, I did make a few changes, so I'll make sure I get you an updated presentation.
Okay, perfect.
I figured I might as well just wait until I didn't make any more changes.
Just change it on the fly. I think people are still trickling in, but we can probably go ahead and get started. So I want to thank everybody for taking some time out of your day to join us. For those of you that are not familiar with Uplevel Systems, we offer a unique infrastructure, IT infrastructure as a service concept. We work exclusively with our MSP partners, and our products are really catered towards your small and mid-sized businesses. One of the things that we've been doing at Uplevel lately is really working to expand our offering for our partners and focusing a lot on cybersecurity, and Actifile is our brand new partner. And so we're excited to have Alex and Guy join us today to go over the solution, and I think it'll be a great addition to your stack. So again, I'll introduce Guy and Alex. Guy is the CEO and co-founder of Actifile. I think he's got a pretty extensive background in cybersecurity and a lot to offer. Alex has a little bit different background. She actually owned her own MSSP I believe in New York for about 24 years, and she sold that, so she's very familiar with the challenges that our MSP partners face on a daily basis. And I think she was one of the original Actifile partners, if I'm not mistaken. So she's got kind of both sides of it. So as we do go through our presentations today, if you do have any questions, please put those in the question and answer section, and we will address those towards the end of the presentation. But with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Guy and to Alex. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and mute.
Guy, did you want to say anything before I started?
I want to thank Corey and Kevin for arranging this very interesting webinar. I'm very excited to join one of our premier partners, Uplevel, with this new introduction to the market. And I think you've got one of the best, most knowledgeable people in the market about data security and compliance, Alex. She has an extensive background, and with no further ado, Alex, please take it from here. And thank you for joining, everyone.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yes, I was also going to thank the Uplevel Systems team for inviting us, and we look forward to working with you. So today we're going to talk about data security and fighting cyber threats and how you can defend your data. So we want to talk a little bit about why we should focus on data security. It's a huge problem out there, and how Actifile in particular can provide a solution. And we'll do an Actifile demo so that you can see it, a little bit of it live, and you can always follow up. We can do more demos and in more detail. And you should know that we do stick with our partners, and we work with them after purchasing to make sure that you get a deeper dive into the product, that your team gets engaged, that we help you with any packaging questions or how to put it out there for prospects and existing clients. So I'll go through the demo, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it offers value to your customers and how you can increase your MRR with it. So I will proceed here. One of the things in terms of focusing on data security is that it is a huge problem. And I'm sure that a lot of you will hear from your clients that it's not going to happen to me. I'm too small. I don't need to worry about it. Well, I pulled some statistics. A lot of the time we pull statistics, and we get statistics that are sort of overall cybersecurity statistics. And a lot of people, I think, don't really resonate with it because they feel that a lot of that is going towards the higher enterprises. So I focused on some of the statistics for small businesses. And if you hear your customers telling you that it's not going to happen to them, one of the things I think you need to really explain to them is that hackers have learned a lot over the years. And one of the things they've learned is that small businesses are easier to attack. They don't have as much in this way of security protections, and they can attack more of them in less time because it is so much easier to get through. And they still gain a lot of profit, because even though the numbers and the profit they may get for one individual breach may not be as large as a huge enterprise, since they can attack more of them in the same time frame, that those profits will add up. And they're less likely to get caught. There's not as much attention on it. And one of the other things that they figured out is that small businesses have key data. So it's well worth it for them to do this. And the numbers are staggering. If you think about 61% of small businesses were targeted in a cyber attack in 2021. That's huge. And if you start looking at the numbers that are dealing specifically with small businesses, like 82% of ransomware attacks in 2021 against companies with fewer than 1,000 employees. And then you go and look at that and say 37% of the companies hit by ransomware had actually fewer than 100. Now you're really getting into, you know, the small businesses that you're dealing with. And it's a little harder for them to refute. So the numbers are still staggering when you look at the dollars. And the other thing, if you think about it in terms of the bad guys versus the good guys, you know, the bad guys get the extra points because they not only managed to do the breaches, they not only managed to profit from it, which is what their real goal is, but they managed to put a lot of them out of business. So, you know, it's really, really a focus that needs to be on everybody's mind. Now, how can Actifile provide a solution for this, right? And the other part of it is the human element is one of the largest issues, and we know that, right? I mean, they talk about 82% of all breaches, the root cause was actually the human element. And people tend to respond to that with cybersecurity insurance or cybersecurity awareness training, but the other side of it is just protecting the data. So Actifile provides the solution in terms of being able to not only detect, identify, and quantify the risk for that data, but also be able to track and monitor who does what to the sensitive data, what applications it flows through, and how it leaves the organization. And that is a real-time ongoing monitoring capability. On top of that, it has a file level encryption that will prevent others from profiting, but it is still an automated and transparent process to the authorized users, so it does not interfere with their workflow. So that aspect of it is huge. And if you think about the typical NIST framework where you're talking about detecting and protecting and responding, Actifile, you know, I think there's quite a few more in that little circle, but Actifile fits the bill for a number of those aspects. So with that in mind, why don't we switch to doing a little demo so you can see it live, and then we'll come back and talk about it. So do you see the Actifile portal screen now?
Yeah, we do.
Okay, perfect. The little green box that's normally around it sort of disappeared, so I wanted to make sure you see it. So this is the main Actifile portal for a customer. Keep in mind that Actifile is a multi-tenant portal, so you as a partner have a login and features that you can set up, and then you configure each individual customer separately. So each individual customer, when you add them, you can specify compliance profiles that you would like to enable. Those compliance profiles will then enable a set of policies that are derived from them that is going to indicate to the system what you want it to do the discovery for. So each one may be different. If you have customers that are DoD contractors and need CMMC compliance, that's in there as well. So this is the main dashboard for a client, and it shows you how many devices have the Actifile agent installed. It is agent-based, so there's one on every endpoint. And doesn't matter, there, you know, one of the issues today is all the remote work and no perimeters anymore. So the agent remains on the endpoint no matter where it is and reports back. And we can see what the total risk calculation is based on the sensitive data that was found across all devices within the organization. If you have turned encryption on, you will see the amount of risk reduction, the amount that you've managed to mitigate. We generally do an encryption with a delay because we're trying to balance the mitigation of risk as well as the operational efficiencies of the organization and their ability to share sensitive data outside of the organization. That tends to occur in the early part of their business process, and then the data gets set aside, never cleaned up. And so we know statistically that a large percentage of the data that is used in a breach is all legacy archive data that has just been kind of forgotten about. So you can very easily, even with a delay in the encryption, a 30-day delay or more, get to at least a 90% risk reduction. Your residual risk is the dollar amount of the risk that remains. These dollar amounts are derived from industry standards. It's Ponemon Institute, KPMG, Ernst & Young. They do surveys of breaches as they occur. And this is to represent the total all-in cost of a breach. So we tend to think of it more in terms of the cost to recover, to do the remediation, but you really have to look at the whole picture. There is often, if there's compliance, there's clearly compliance fines. There may be legal fees that are brought in. If you have cybersecurity insurance, they'll bring in a whole forensics team. They may require you to install and purchase certain kinds of software, so that gets included. And then it also includes things like the damage control expenses of having to go out and do more marketing and the loss of reputation and the loss of customers. So you can argue plus or minus what the number is, but bottom line, if it's a large number, then it's a higher risk. So we can dig into these portals to look at specific things like the data risk. When you look at the data risk, keep in mind this is a demo account, so it's got a lot of extra policies that probably wouldn't be there on a normal basis, and a lot of them are there for test purposes. But fundamentally, what this screen is going to show you is the types of sensitive data that have been found across all the devices within the organization. And it'll tell you whether the data is encrypted or not. It will tell you whether the data is deemed as sensitive or not. So for example, you could take certain types of data that you want to track, mark it as non-sensitive. It'll still give you the information about the types of how much of that data is there, but it doesn't include it in the overall risk calculation for the organization. So if you just wanted to know how many PowerPoint files there were within an organization, you could track that and you could see exactly where there are, but not count it as part of that risk per se, right? Because it may not actually include sensitive data. So there's a lot of powerful other features that come about from Actifile based on the fact that you have this information. So it'll tell you how many files were found, how many records from that type, and then what's that overall dollar risk calculation for it. Some risks are, might be deemed $1, others might be deemed $20, others might be $200. It depends on the type of sensitive data. We also tell you how much, if the data is encrypted, how much of this risk is actually been mitigated. Now, it may look kind of odd here, like for example, this Ireland driving license one, it's marked as not encrypted. So none of this data is encrypted. However, you'll see that a certain amount of the data has been mitigated and encrypted. And the reason for that is it probably was tagged by a UK national identification number, as well as the Ireland driving license. So by virtue of the fact that it included this type of data, the file actually does get encrypted, and therefore you're going to see an encrypted risk calculation for the data, even though this particular data type wasn't encrypted. Hopefully that makes sense. Other things that you can do in here is drill down into this type to see specifically what are the files that were found. So for example, in this one, you see that it's tagged by a number of different types of data. This is, I'm not sure what the IE pass is, probably the Ireland passport and the UK identification number. We have no access to the content of this data. Usually by just glancing at the file names, you can tell that it seems like it's legitimate. And yes, this is actually that type of sensitive data. But if you actually want to go and look at the contents of the file, you would have to have access to that system. you could copy the path, go to that system and open up the file and then look to see what it was that was found in there. If you want to just see where it is on the device, we do have access to that information, so we can tell you which folder it was in. You can see the other files in the folder and whether they're also tagged by that same type of sensitive data. And you can traverse any of these folder structures within that device in order to look at other folders. So that can also be very useful. And you can look at the analytics for any particular file to see who else has accessed that file. It may be it was just created, or it may be that you've had 20 people in the organization have been opening and closing it and deleting it and changing it and doing whatever with it. So you would see that. At a glance, you can tell that this file was encrypted. It's tagged with this green encrypted tag. And you can see that those files were encrypted, but these are not. And generally that's going to be because it hasn't met the delay time frame for the encryption. So once it ages out to that and that last modified date reaches whatever the delay is, then it will get encrypted. As a user that's authorized opens this file, Actifile is going to transparently make sure that the file gets decrypted and then opened up in Word for the user. The user never knows that it was encrypted. And they make their changes and save it, and Actifile will have the file get re-encrypted and restored. So if another user that's authorized accesses that file, then they will go through that same process and everybody will be able to operate on the file transparently and seamlessly. If the data is taken in a breach, then that file is useless to the threat actors as it's not readable by them. So other ways that you can look at this data is to look at the other portals. So we started out with looking at the data risk, but we can also look at the application risk. And looking at the application risk is going to tell us a number of things. One, it's going to present to you all of the web applications and local processes that have handled files within the organization. If they're not handling files, you're not going to see them listed here. But it will also tell you, for example, how many sensitive files went through that process or application and how many devices are using it. So it can be very useful to kind of find shadow IT. So for example, if the organization sanctions OneDrive use, but doesn't sanction Dropbox, and you see Dropbox showing up in these lists with a lot of sensitive data going through them, then that can be a red flag. You know, who's putting sensitive data through Dropbox when the organization only uses OneDrive, right? Other things you can do is just see that there's a large amount of sensitive data going through a particular application, and it may be something you want to make sure that you whitelist as you're going through that process. I was going to go back and show you here, neglected to show you on the data risk thing. If you want to encrypt this data, it's as easy as clicking on this red open lock, turning the encryption on. The delay we normally recommend is 30. That's going to be the default. If you're concerned about it, you can push it out to 60 or 90 days. We've done this at some clients, and then we bring it down as time goes on. We generally find with the delay now that it does not interfere much with the day-to-day processes, so don't be afraid of encryption. And then if you need to whitelist it, knowing that after the data is encrypted, they want to be able to, say, attach a sensitive file to Outlook to send out to a user. You could add Outlook from the additional decryption channels, and then basically Actifile will decrypt it before the file goes to as an attachment to Outlook. And you rely on your mail encryption feature to handle the transmission, secure transmission of the data, and making sure that the recipient can read it. We can always dive into that in more detail, but so we talked about the application risk. Let's talk about the device risk. When you look at it from the device risk perspective, every one of these screens is always going to present the largest risk first. So this is going to be all the devices within the organization that have Actifile installed on them and ordered in that risk order. So this in and of itself, when you just come in and glance at this, can be very telling. You might see, you expect to see the file servers to be the highest risk, but beyond that, maybe the top risk after that is a user, that's an intern. Why would the intern's machine have such a high risk? That's a red flag. So you can dig into that specific device, and you can see a mini dashboard for each device, and you can see what's the sensitive files found specifically on that device. And if you look at this, and let's say it's the intern, or in fact, I was looking at somebody the other day, they were a marketing person, and their highest risk represented exactly what their role was. So looks normal, right? You look at this and let's say it's the intern, and the highest risks classifications that are showing up is financial data. Well, that'd be a red flag. Why does the intern have access to the financial data? But what you may come to find if you dig into it, because again, you can click on all of these and dig in through to see what the files are, is that it's possible that this was a hand-me-down machine passed on to 3 different C-level executives. And now, you know, it's an older machine, but it's good enough for the intern, so the intern gets it. But guess what? Nobody cleaned up the domain profiles for the 3 C-level executives before they kept recommissioning it. So that, you know, can tell you cleanup work that needs to be done, improve your own IT processes, or, you know, it, on the flip side, could be the fact that the intern has managed to get access to sensitive data that they shouldn't. And so you can use the system to find all kinds of things. You can drill into the folders on that device as well, specifically on that device, and, you know, do a couple of other settings here as well. And then the last portal I wanted to talk about is the activity log. So this is going to give you ways to slice and dice the information in a myriad of ways. So you can specifically look at a particular device. You can specifically look at a particular file operation. This list grows. Actifile is not only doing the discovery on the data at rest, which is that basic number that you see on the dashboard, but at the same time, it is also on an ongoing basis capturing who does what to those files and what applications it flows through and how it leaves the organization. So as people are using the system after Actifile as an agent is installed, these file operations are going to grow to everything that people are doing. So if you want to know whether employee X has deleted files, you could do a search to look for that. And if you find they've deleted a large number of files, all from one folder of the sensitive data, maybe that's a red flag that they're maliciously doing something. Or you could come in here and determine what files they've had access to and what files have left the organization. If we look at this device risk and you looked at a specific PC, you will see down below here, if I'm neglected to show this too, the outbound and the inbound cloud services. So you see data that's coming in and out of that device through cloud services at least. So if you see Dropbox listed here and a large amount of data that's going out, maybe this employee is trying to steal data before they leave. So lots of uses for this kind of activity here. I think that's about it that I wanted to show for today. Just wanted to give you some kind of a high level view and go back to the presentation. So we left off with the Actifile demo here. I presume you're seeing the Actifile demo slide here and moving on to the offer value slide. Is that true? Want to make sure you're actually seeing the screens.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right, thanks. So we just did a little bit of a demo. I pointed out a number of these things that are in this list as we went through the demo, but wanted to talk a little bit about summarizing how Actifile can provide value. There's a whole bunch more things that can go into this list, but what I wanted to point out is I divided this list so you could see that this set of data, these line items above here, is all value that you can provide with just the discovery and the monitoring portion of it. And that's important to note because even without turning on encryption, you can distinguish yourself as an MSP by being able to provide this kind of value because you have this wealth of information available to you. And there are more that can fall into both of these lists, but the last 3 are definitely items that you're going to get value from because you've turned encryption on. So, you know, the basic data asset inventory that we talked about is huge, the monitoring, the ongoing monitoring, and then the file level encryption. But even with just the data discovery and the monitoring, we talked about being able to find some of that shadow IT, unsanctioned applications that you don't really want to have in use. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's, you know, a person probably got called in to pick up a sick kid and they wanted to finish something. So they throw sensitive file out onto their Dropbox or whatever, so they can work at it from home. But they don't think about the fact that they have now put the organization in jeopardy, and that file could end up anywhere, right? Like in the middle of a Shutterfly Christmas book that they send to 20 members of the family, who knows, right? But one of the things I wanted to talk about is you think about the wealth of information that you have because of all of that data and who's doing what to it. You could actually define project work, and you could study and work through that data to improve and offer project services to improve your client's business procedures and or to help develop operational policies. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can benefit here. Data subject access requests, DSARs, these are going to become more and more prevalent in this country. It's something that's more used, I think, in Europe at this point, but consumers have the right to ask any business to provide the list of data and show them what sensitive data they have on them, what personal information they have on them. And an organization needs to be able to respond to that. And they have a limited amount of time in which they can respond to it. So with Actifile, I didn't show you this feature, but there is a specific feature where you can do a query to find out what information pertains on a particular individual. So you'd be able to satisfy those requests. Obviously, we talked about monitoring suspicious employee behavior, being able to look to see what they've accessed. Sometimes legal even wants to know what files did they have access to? Did they take any data with them? You know, so you could provide that through Actifile. And you could be providing help with a lawsuit. I know we were involved with a number of different lawsuits, and sometimes they were around data, and that could be huge. And now with breaches, they're also being followed up with class action suits. So not only does the customer have the cost of the remediation and the damage control and all of that, they also may have the cost of an additional class action suit from a customer. So, searching for specific data, we have some kind of funny examples. I'll give you one of mine. I was trying to figure out how much I had paid my daughter through ZellePay for various things, over a couple of different years. When I went out to the ZellePay portals, I could only get a certain amount of time. So I realized I wanted to go back 2 years before then. And I started opening up bank account statements because it's in there. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. So I went to Actifile, I created a policy to look for the Zelle payment information, and it came back and gave me a list of all of the bank account statements that had Zelle pay information in them, and I only had to open those to figure out what I was looking for. We have another MSP that had a client wanting to find their eyeglass prescription. They were loath to call their doctor yet again because they'd already called once to get it and had lost it again. And they used the policy for eyeglass prescriptions that's built into Actifile to find the prescriptions for them. So, I mean, silly little things, but it just gives you examples of where you can think out of the box of how you could make use of this. And, you know, that can be helpful. So another example was finding that there was like commission structure data, commission payments in a shared drive instead of in the finance drive where it should have been. So another use of making sure data is in the right place by reviewing it. You know, the last three, clearly you'd have to have encryption turned on, but if you turn on encryption, then you can mitigate a large amount of that risk and still keep it easy to use for the authorized users. And you have the ability to check those boxes for both compliance and cybersecurity insurance. I'm really curious what people, we were asked a lot of the time to help with these cybersecurity applications. And I'm very curious what people answer if they don't have Actifile, because I don't see how they can answer the file level encryption question. I think some people sometimes use BitLocker, but it doesn't do file level encryption. So if the data is taken in an exfiltration mode from a breach, it's not going to be encrypted. So Actifile really provides the ability to soundly answer that question with a yes, right? And you're providing due diligence to your customers, which is huge. let's talk a little bit about Actifile as kind of a multi-tier approach and how it can help you with increasing your MRR. So clearly, it's a no-brainer in an assessment, right? You charge for an assessment, you look for vulnerability scans, you look for dark web, you do something that gives you a report on the Active Directory exposures, you know, all that kind of stuff. And if you include Actifile in that, then you get the data information as well. But even if you include it just in your base MSP stack, this is where you really can provide some value. You know, here's your normal classical base MSP stack. You might have a few other things in it. But, you know, with this, you provide your users with your customers with a hardware and a software asset inventory. But very few people provide a data asset inventory. And what's really key within the organization, it's the data, right? So if you include Actifile in your base MSP stack, then you have the ability to provide that data asset inventory. You get the ability to provide the calculated value for that data asset, which is now represents what the cost of a breach could represent. And you have the ongoing monitoring. And with the ongoing monitoring, you can, even if the data asset value number is low, and they still may want to do encryption, it depends on their attitude, right? Their attitude could be, oh yeah, I don't want to compromise even one employee's social security number. Others are going to say, I don't care, I'll take my chances. But you as the provider can say, you know, you got a reasonable level of security in place. I'm okay with that. We'll just take the risk, right? But I'm going to continue to monitor it. And because something may change. You could take on a new client, you could take on a new aspect of the business, and the whole picture could be very different a few months from now. And at that point, I'll know, and we can come back and have a different conversation. So no matter what, you're providing value. Plus, remember all those things at that top part of that list? All of those are additional value that you can provide just by having discovery and monitoring in your base stack. Now, you get that quantification of the risk, and that, you know, is huge because it tells you what kind of a risk may be posed for the business. And at this point, it's a business risk, right? This is not an IT conversation. It's not a security conversation. This is a risk to the business and its ability to survive. And bottom line, whether you agree with the number or not, you take away or add to it, whatever you think is right for this particular business or customer of yours. Bottom line, a high dollar value equates to a high risk. And so at that point, you really know, you know what you're dealing with, you know the scope of the engagement, and you know what sensitive data they have and what risk that they are dealing with. And at that point, now you can have a very concrete discussion. You can counter all those anecdotal statements like, I don't have to worry about compliance because I use a compliance SaaS application. I've heard that a million times from CPAs. I use Thomson Reuters, so I don't have to worry about it. I have a medical record system, so it's compliant. I don't have to worry about it. What they don't realize is a lot of that data flows through their downloads folders. When they print a report, they look at something, they do whatever. So you'll find there's a lot more data on the endpoints. If you have Actifile and have done this data asset inventory, they can't argue that. It's right there in front of them. So at this point, you start to think about a multi-tier approach. And you're going to put more security in place for this customer because they have a higher risk. So you may end up with some project work to, I don't know, do some Active Directory work, replace some devices, add some security components to them. You may put in some security solutions that are going to help to prevent and respond to an attack, because you definitely want to try to prevent an attack from occurring. But this is where you can take that two-prong approach and you put Actifile into the stack as well to turn on the encryption portion of it. And now you are protecting the data in the event of a breach. So you're not worrying about whether the breach is going to occur or not. You're going to try to prevent it, obviously, right? But you can't guarantee that, especially with the human element. So it's likely to occur, even if there are protective solutions in place. And Actifile is taking the approach that says, when it does occur, we're going to try to preemptively protect the data and mitigate the risk. So that's where this real value really can come in. Some of you may go forward and just stick with one stack, in which case, fine, Actifile is in it. You can use it for all of these purposes. Others are still going forward with multiple stacks. But no matter what, I think the important thing is to just include it. Sell it as a group of things. Don't do it a la carte. Don't let them choose, right? In the event of a breach, you have a large percentage of the data that's protected because you have mitigated that risk. You have enormous information to provide to the forensics teams. It's such a huge start for them. And you could potentially reduce compliance reporting and compliance fines, right? Most of these compliance or regulatory things make the statement that says you need to report the unprotected sensitive data. The unprotected sensitive data. If you can use Actifile to show that this data was protected, it was encrypted when the breach occurred, then you don't have to report that potentially, depending on what the fine print is on there. And you probably won't have to pay any fines on it. A lot of the time what's happening is people are paying these enormous fines because they can't quantify that. All they can do is basically say up to X amount of data was taken. And it's a very gross number. So you really could make a difference in terms of what that end cost really is. And you're doing due diligence by your clients. One of the biggest things to these huge fines as well is if the customer is accused of being woefully negligent, then those fines are even higher. So by making the effort to protect the data, you have shown due diligence, and that's a huge thing as well. So what's your job? Your job is to be your client's trusted security advisor. You need to educate them. You need to make sure that they understand that they really are a target. It is likely to happen. And what the huge risk is to the business if a breach occurs. And obviously, if there's compliance requirements for their industry, and there's huge numbers of them and more coming out all the time with FTC, and the other regulations. Automotive is now European and Asia Pacific automotive. If you're manufacturing parts for them in the US, they're going to require some of their industry certifications. So there's compliance, regulatory, and certification. Some of them are statewide. A lot of people don't realize that their states have privacy regulations. Most of the businesses don't, that's for sure. And you can use Actifile to understand what that risk is. Once you understand it, then you can put a plan in place. How do you put a plan in place to protect something if you don't really know what you're trying to protect? And data is the key of what you're trying to protect. So it is important. And a discussion on return on mitigation, right? So one of the interesting things is, one of the other statistics is that 17% of SMBs have cybersecurity insurance, and that's it. Another correlating statistics, which I find really fascinating, is that only 17% of SMBs encrypt their data. Now, there's no actual correlation between these two, but they both happen to be 17%. And I'm willing to bet, for the most part, it's the 17% that have cybersecurity insurance, because on the application, in order to get it, they have to encrypt their data. So they're encrypting their data. So it's fascinating, but it also shows that it's a huge market out there. And this is where the return on mitigation conversation comes in, right? All of those other costs that we were talking about that could occur, and Actifile's quantifying it for you, at least at some level, some gross level there. You can come in, take a look at what that is. That puts most businesses out of business almost immediately. So the return on the mitigation concept is, if you invest in these things now up front, it may reduce what your actual mitigation costs are in the event of it occurring. So it's not only putting in maybe some technology solutions to help prevent the attack, to mitigate the risk with Actifile encryption, to purchase cybersecurity insurance. And don't let them tell you that their professional E&O insurance or their malpractice insurance covers it, because it doesn't. And they're finding out that it doesn't. So calculating some of that into the equation can be huge. So that's a business discussion to have. And the other thing is to making sure that you offer security and compliance. I'm going to tell you, if you don't offer it to your clients, somebody else is going to, and they'll come in and they'll take it over. So, everybody can provide patch management, everybody can provide, monitoring, etc., and backup and all of that stuff. But you're really going to distinguish yourself with some of these extra features and other extra value that you can provide. And if security and compliance is in your wheelhouse, that's great, right? You can do your compliance frameworks and work with them at that level. If it's not, you still should be offering it, but just partner with a compliance professional, and they're the ones who can get into the nitty-gritty of all those different regulations. And I think that's an important thing to take away, right? It's more of a team that needs to provide the due diligence and the do right by your clients, and that's the important thing. So with that, I guess I'll open it up to any questions if anybody has any. There's a few little tips here and some of the reminders of what some of the value was. And I also wanted to point out that if you are looking for more information, you can contact Uplevel Systems and get more information there, and they can always bring us in to do more detailed demos with you or whatever else that you need. So I don't know if you've got questions, Corey, or...
We do have a few. Guy answered a bunch of them. So if you don't mind, Guy, I think we should go back through some of those in case other people didn't see them.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to.
Since you already answered, I'm going to make you answer them again. The first one was, how does Actifile differentiate itself from other security solutions on the market? And then how does the remediation process with Actifile compare to that of other solutions?
Okay, so first of all, Actifile is a data security product. My biggest, I would say, and most interesting metaphor over here that I quite often use, and it's kind of a little bit stupid and goofy, but it makes a big difference when you use it. Think about yourself as a business owner of a jewelry store. Okay, Fifth Avenue in New York, very expensive jewels, right? You've got diamonds and necklaces and rubies, very expensive watches, and you're very responsible and a business owner, and you put a very good alarm on the windows and a very good lock on the door, which is the security mechanisms people use in the real world, which is equivalent to firewall and EDR and all types of security mechanisms. They're all trying to prevent, God forbid, a hacker or burglar in the case of the jewelry store, or an insider, a salesman that is trying, to show the diamonds outside the shop. They're trying to avoid, that problem. The problem is that without a good inventory system, if you don't know how many diamonds you have in the shop, how can you protect them? How can you really understand what to do? So most of the organizations that you serve as MSPs will put, the firewall and the EDR, the lock and the alarm. But the more you do of that, you're not actually understanding how much data you have and how much data you have at risk. And more importantly, imagine that each and every piece of jewelry is tagged, monitored. We know it, went out or went in from the store at any given time. Imagine that's a mechanism that Actifile provides. And not only that, each and every diamond is protected in a way that in the shop, it's a diamond. It's encrypted. Outside, but open for all the users within the organization. If someone takes it out unintentionally or maliciously, it's not a very expensive piece of jewelry anymore. It's something useless because it's protected, it's encrypted. So to summarize, other security mechanisms are trying to add another layer of alarms and locks, doors and windows. Okay, we are doing the step, another very important step of giving you the inventory, the data risk quantification, the initial discovery and all of that. We're checking where are all the diamonds in any given moment, and we're protecting them preemptively so you can sleep better at night. So that's the big difference. The remediation, of course, is first of all, you have forensics evidence. Immediately after you install Actifile, you have the forensic evidence that if God forbid something happens, you know exactly how much data you had, who touched it at any given time, and what happened to it. And once you encrypt, and you encrypt only the sensitive files that are based on our 5,000 end customers, is about 5 to 10% of the overall files in the organization. Once you do that, very selectively. And with one click of a button, you're now protected from any ransomware attack. You're protected from malicious, malware, or from insiders that are doing their job but trying to be productive and export those files to different shadow IT, Slack, Skype, WeTransfer. You have it.
The
Long
other thing
story.
the other
Yeah.
thing I say sometimes is many of the security solutions are trying to stay ahead of the bad guys. They need to stay ahead of the bad guys in order to be able to prevent an attack from occurring, right? But Actifile is just looking at it that says, attack's going to happen, so we're just going to try to protect the data so that when it does, it's useless.
So would you say that you still would like to have the EDR in place as well, or is this replace that level of security?
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying, whatever solutions you want, this screen here where we talk about the two-pronged approach, where you're going to put solutions in place to prevent an attack from occurring, you definitely should do that. If you've got a client that has a higher risk, they should have a higher level of security to help prevent an attack from occurring. But also take that two-pronged approach where you include Actifile, turn on the encryption. Now you've protected the data and you've mitigated the breach, mitigated the risk in the event of a breach. So when it does occur, and it can occur even with all these solutions in place, no matter how many you put in place, right? It can still occur.
We all know, just to summarize, Corey, we all know that in the metaphor of a jewelry store, if some burglar wants to, break into a jewelry store, they will break. If someone wants to hit your customers, they will succeed, most probably, if they do really, really a good job. Now, again, you need the lock on the door. No, if the door is open, it's much easier to get in. But once somebody is in, you have no defense and you have no records of what happened. So don't trust only the locks and the alarms. Do something additional that provides you a better, ongoing monitoring and immediate, remediation. Very simple one.
Perfect. The next question was, who would our closest competitor be and what differentiates Actifile?
Well, Actifile is a very unique solution in the market. We're a first mover. And by the way, it was designed with MSPs like Alex, and it was built for MSPs. And we're going only through the channel to mid-market customers. We're not going for the enterprise, and we're working only with the channel. It's important to say. So competitors can be Kaseya Rapid Fire Tools, for instance, who does very limited type of PI scanning. It could be the old iScan of SolarWinds, for that matter. It could be high-end, enterprise products that many of the mid-market customers and their MSPs cannot use, like ForcePoint or Proofpoint, for that matter. It could be encryption tools. You can use an encryption tool to encrypt the data, but you have to go one by one, file by file, while Actifile does that automatically per the data risk. So there's no right now a lot, if at all, solutions that are so comprehensive, automatic, and easy to use. I think you saw what Alex showed. Every IT admin can operate it. You don't have to be a big data security expert, and you don't have to be a senior person either. It can be your junior person because they don't see the sensitive data. They're just dealing with the statistics. Okay? We don't load the upload to the upload files to the cloud. So hopefully that answers the question.
I think you went right into the next question, which was our training videos available. So we do have our lower level techs on there. Where do we get training?
Yeah, first of all, we are preparing a new batch. We made a lot of the problem with videos is when you constantly improve and update your systems like we do, they keep on changing the videos. But we can offer you something much better. We have, and Alex is our head of customer success, and as she said earlier, we have a very organized onboarding, process. We train you, we help you solve issues, and we also give the expertise on how to sell data security products. This slide that Alex, showed is part of a method, of a methodology on how to sell the add-on of data security on top of your existing security stack. And Alex is a great expert in that.
I can
So,
also
yeah,
answer that. I can go in and train all of those techs, no problem.
Yeah, to cut a long story short, yeah. Thank you, Alex.
I'll just go to the office.
I'm giving you a long story, and Alex is giving you the essence of it. Thank you, Alex. I agree. So don't
By the way,
worry
I
about
did
it.
just talk to Fred the other day, and I told him I'd come in, so.
The next one is, how does Actifile help organizations achieve compliance with security standards such as CMMC and NIST?
Yeah, Alex, I think you're the best one to answer this.
So yes, so there we have mappings to show how CMMC and some of the various NIST levels, obviously the NIST is sort of the foundation for many of the other compliances. Actually, if I turn this off, I can show you. I did not do that. I gotta be on this screen. Deployment, compliance profiles, CMMC is one of the compliance profiles that you can turn on. And we can also provide you, if you give us some contact information there, to the mapping for the CMMC compliance. Oh, and actually to further that though, there's a whole FIPS capability here. So some of the CMMC compliance requires the FIPS validation. There's a whole set of features within Actifile where you can define a particular type of sensitive data as requiring FIPS validation. You can then, it'll show you which devices have that kind of CMMC FIPS validated required data on it, and then whether it meets it or not. So you can use those as well, and then you can get the FIPS encryption for it. So I hope that helps.
I think we had this one a couple of times, but how does Actifile work with files that are in the cloud?
Yeah. So first of all, and this is a new capability, Actifile does scan Office 365, SharePoint, and OneDrive. That's number one. We have a deployment, option for that as well. That's one. And we're expanding on that. We will cover later on Google Workspace, Amazon S3, etc., etc. But you have to keep in mind, and I'm using another metaphor, I'm all for metaphors today, that scanning your Microsoft SharePoint or OneDrive is like looking for the coin that you lost in a dark alley under the lamp, okay? There's a full alley of options to search, but it's too dark and you're not looking over there. In a typical installation of Actifile, we see that most of the data that leaves the organization goes to cloud applications that are not sanctioned by the organization. You're not aware of it at all. And it could be a communication app like Skype. It could be a productivity app like Monday.com. It could be even a third-party portal like Cerner or McKesson that are healthcare, portals that should be okay to transfer data to. The only way you can scan that and know that in real time is with Actifile. So we're giving you 3 logical places where data can be. It could be on-premise, NAS, network attached storage. It could be on file servers, Windows, Linux. It could be on your machines, Windows, Mac. We're scanning, 365 with expansion on that. And we're giving you a unique view on Shadow IT application, cloud specifically, so you can at least know what people are putting over there on a constant basis, which is a completely blind spot for you at any given moment. Okay?
I think we addressed this one. And so what is Actifile? What happens if there is a breach? What do we do?
First of all, if you're already encrypted the data, you're in compliance. All the compliance frameworks say that if you encrypted the data, you're in compliance. And more importantly, you're not just in compliance, because compliance is not security. If somebody stole the data, they can steal the data, nobody can open it. We have AES-256 strong encryption, by the way, based on the Windows and Mac operating system cryptography library. So we did not invent encryption, very strong encryption. So first of all, if there is a breach and you encrypt it, you shouldn't worry. If there is a breach and you're not encrypting, but you have at least Actifile, then you can know exactly what type of data you had, which applications touched it. You can even limit. There's a functionality called whitelisting. You can even limit the applications that can touch the data. You can decide only Word can open them, and not a malware that's trying to, to steal a lot of them. And if you don't have Actifile and you have a breach, install Actifile afterwards. At least you'll know, what residual data you have, what happened. It's not the best, but it's helpful when we already have few partners that are doing it. In case there is a breach in one of their customers who did not want to have Actifile, then they come afterwards and install Actifile to at least know what happened afterwards.
But keep in mind that the purpose of Actifile is not to detect and alert you to a breach. That's the purpose of your other security solutions. The purpose of Actifile is to protect the data in the event of a breach. So it's mitigating the risk by encrypting the data and making it useless to the threat actor. Now, there are some places where you can define some events. You can set up some alerts, but the whole point is more of a set it and forget it kind of a thing. You've set it up, you've encrypted the data. Obviously, there's some maintenance things you got to keep an eye on and update policies, etc. But for the most part, your intent is to try to protect the data through encryption. And then in the event of a breach, you've mitigated the risk.
Perfect. So when people try it out, how do we get an assessment or a demo? And I think we can just call us, but I don't know if you've got a more comprehensive answer than that.
Yeah, we have what we call an NFR, non for resale. It's a process where we enable MSPs to test Actifile internally and answer all their questions. By the way, MSPs have sensitive data internally as well. We run into it all the time, which is an issue by itself. And you can use Actifile for an ongoing basis to protect yourself internally. So the NFR is for good if you're a customer of ours, and we can help you do data risk assessment at customers and start the rolling of the process of deploying and activating Actifile at your customers.
More that are still open. Is Actifile on the Uplevel price list? A good question. It is on our next price list, which we're getting ready to release. In the interim, if you do have any questions regarding pricing, please just reach out and give me a call or an email, and I'd be happy to go through that with you. And then, does Actifile integrate with Uplevel, and how do the products work together? So it does not necessarily integrate with our system, so it's completely independent from it. They certainly work well together. So you do not need to have your clients, do not need to be on an Uplevel device to use Actifile. Okay, looks like those are all the questions. Do we have any other questions? Anybody else have any questions before we let Alex and Guy go for the afternoon and the evening? Depends on where you're located. I think that might be about it. So I appreciate everybody's time for attending today.
Thank you.
We will make a recording available to review. And Alex and Guy, thank you very much for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
I also noticed the person who asked about the CMMC passed that question as an anonymous attendee. If you would like to give Corey your information and he can pass it on to me, then I can send you that mapping if you're interested in it.
And
for the controls, for the CMMC controls.
My email is right there on the bottom of the screen, and you can always just give it. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Greatly appreciate your time, and we look forward to contacting everybody soon.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.